Race and gender have always been issues in our society. Many times throughout the history of our country, American people have been forced to ask themselves, which comes first? When forming a more perfect union, which is the more urgent cause, equality of the races or of the genders?
The suffragists of the mid-19th century were asked to put aside suffrage and work for abolition, and they did. I mean, Susan B. Anthony crusaded for abolition, and they were told, your turn will come after the Civil War.
After the Civil War was the first time that Americans asked themselves the painful question, who deserves equal rights first, women or African Americans? Women's time did not come through the 15th Amendment. Their time would not come for 50 years through the passage of the 19th Amendment. 50 years later, another movement for gender equality arose, coinciding once again with a movement for racial equality. Having gained the right to vote, both groups now searched for social equality. African Americans hoped for desegregated public areas, schools, and transportation. Women worked for a fair media image of women, equal pay for equal work, and ending sexual harassment in the workplace. Both groups made great strides. In 2008, Democrats had a historic choice to nominate an African American or a woman.
This story about how the 15th Amendment becomes an amendment just to extend suffrage, universal male suffrage, and not women's suffrage, is also reflected in our current politics around the painful process of the Hillary Clinton-Barack Obama primary fight. And the ways in which the Hillary Clinton-Barack Obama primary fight forced us to ask, who's first, whose turn is it, who's next,
What made you choose to vote for Obama over Hillary?
Actually, I'm sure I must have voted for Obama, but I think it was really hard until I actually got into the voting booth.
Now, as people look back in retrospect, there's some skepticism, particularly among Democratic liberals, with some of the performance of Obama. Hillary Clinton is generally seen to have been very, very high-quality Secretary of State. What some of the polls are showing right now is that, in fact, she's more popular than the president. And so it's probably not that surprising that there are at least some Democrats and Democratic women who now look at least a little bit wistful, you might say, about what happened in 2008 and are saying, well, maybe we would have made that judgment a little differently if we knew then what we know now about what's happened with the Obama presidency.
Many women are less wistful about their decision to vote for Obama. Was it hard not to support a woman running for president?
No, and I seriously looked at that, but I don't vote for candidates based on their gender. I consider their position on the issues, and if the majority of their opinions on the issues are consistent with mine, and that's what makes my voting decision.
Was it hard not to vote your gender in 2008?
No, it wasn't. I don't really vote gender, I vote person.
Indeed, exit polls show that Obama prevailed because he won African Americans by 70 points and lost women by only 3.
I felt like her overall personality, the way she would her approach, the way she comes off to people would be off-putting.
I think, like probably most people, I thought that President Obama, then candidate Obama, brought a new perspective, a fresh approach to problem solving, especially as it relates to domestic issues.
Because Hillary Clinton seemed to have been around for a long time in American politics and was a real known quantity, I think there was a lot of sense that she wasn't that path-breaking or that she wasn't that history maker. She turned out to be the establishment candidate and was never able to capitalize very well on history-making potential of her own candidacy.
But on this January night, at this defining moment in history, you have done what the cynics said we couldn't do.
And once he won in Iowa, ironically largely with white voters, at that time the polls then shifted dramatically with African American voters to Barack Obama.
That is our mission, Democrats. Let's elect Barack Obama and Joe Biden for that future worthy of our great country.
As with the 15th Amendment, women stepped aside because their turn had not yet come. I first started working on this documentary because I was curious about the 15th Amendment and why the American people didn't just give women and African Americans the right to vote all at the same time. I see now why they didn't. Americans have always had trouble with a lot of change. After fighting a war, Americans were reluctantly ready to invite black people into society by giving them the right to vote. But when women asked for the right to vote as well, they did not grant it. After all, they were only just getting used to the idea of African Americans voting. The pattern continued into the 19-teens, when Americans were gradually becoming accustomed to the idea of women voting, and African Americans were already asking for equal social rights and desegregation. You saw the same thing happening in the 1960s and 70s, where African Americans gained legislation granting them equal social rights, but second-wave feminists were unable to even pass the ERA. In 2008, Americans were once again confronted with the possibility of very much change, all at one time. But instead of saying, "Oh, I might be ready for a black president, but never a woman," or vice versa, most American people were ready for either person to become president. But they didn't really think of it in those terms. Instead of voting because of the candidate's gender or race, they voted because of issues. And I think in that way, we, as Americans, have made very much progress.